the Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media. Today I welcome Dr. Cheryl Murphy, who, in addition to being an optometrist, has a passion for scientific writing and journal articles. Cheryl actually interviewed my dad and I almost 13 years ago for a review of Optometric business article on keeping the profession in the family. I will link that article in the show notes. I hope you enjoy our conversation. As always, please comment, let us know what you're thinking, share this episode, certainly give us a 5-star review, and support those who support us. Everyone, a quick heads up about something I'm really excited about. On June 24th, during the AOA meeting, we'll be part of a live interactive event that takes a deep dive into how AI is transforming our practices and our profession. We're calling it the Gateway to the Revolution in Optometry. If you're a doctor, a staff member, somebody in the industry who's wondering how to actually use AI, not just talk about it, this session's for you. We'll cover how to demystify AI, ways to leverage data for better patient care and practice performance, lessons from other industries, and it definitely is a live AI workshop to show you real-world applications. And the best part, the event is free thanks to our partnership with the AOA, but space is limited. So head to gatewaytour.ai to grab your spot. Again, that's gatewaytour.ai. See you there. The Myopia Collective. CooperVision and the AOA have partnered in a groundbreaking initiative to change the way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo and elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, and hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today. In the past, our focus revolved around prescribing MacuHealth or MacuHealth Plus to patients at risk of macular degeneration, while also recommending it to collegiate and professional athletes for enhanced contrast sensitivity in sports performance. However, this year's introduction of the Life Meter has been a game changer. The Life Meter revealed a concerning truth. Many of my patients have alarmingly low skin carotenoid levels, indicating potential deficiencies in essential body tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, Life Meter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness has been demonstrated across 2,000 subjects with diverse backgrounds. With this newfound insight, I can now have meaningful conversations about carotenoid levels with all of my patients, even those who may seem outwardly healthy. To learn more about this empowering technology, feel free to contact your MacuHealth representative or click on the link in the show notes. Together, let's optimize patient care and elevate their well-being. Yeah, the next live one will actually be tomorrow on when we do the book nerds that I do with
that's cool.
Kyle Clutie and Brianna Rue. Yeah, that kind of stumbled into that. We had no intention of creating a book club.
Yeah.
In fact,
but there you went. I got to get your summer book list.
Yeah. It's been a good one. In fact, I never wanted to do anything anywhere in the English history, writing papers, reading books part of the world. In fact, I promised my college English professor at San Diego State that I would not take any more English classes if she passed me.
You should send her a copy of the podcast.
Yeah, life has a funny way of doing a 360 on you. So Cheryl, we were talking before we hit the go live button that it's been a minute since you and I have spoken live.
Yeah. Certainly has more than 10 years.
More than 10 years. And she's referencing an article that she did for Review of Optometric Business back in, I'll have the date right here. Did I close it? No, here we go. Review of Optometric Business back in July 25th, 2012. So 13 years ago, almost to the day, on keeping an optometric practice in the family, an article she did on my dad and I definitely don't look like I do now in the photo from that article.
Who does? We wish we could rewind sometimes. We'll keep moving forward, though. Yeah, that
Absolutely.
was actually part of a series of articles that Review of Optometric Business had me do. I did a few different families. I think at least three to five families. And optometry is such a unique profession in that that passion, not only for science but for optometry in general. Since you're exposed to it at such a young age, it just gets in your blood, and you can't escape it. It's passed down. So it's
Nope.
so interesting to see that this profession, there's so many families that keep the tradition going and the quality care.
Yeah, no, it's pretty neat, and we may have to revisit it because now I've got my son working in the office, leading our. So he
Oh,
leads our techs and um, loves getting into the weeds on all the new equipments and how best to apply them for to give clinical outcomes, but efficiencies, and he
wow.
comes from kind of that business side of it. So it's pretty neat having any given day 3 generations now in the practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that is unique. I wish my kids were going into optometry. No such luck. No
Wow.
such luck. My daughter just won an award last night for in the IB program for biology, and I told her, I was like, "See, maybe you should go pre-med." And she's like, "I'll do what I want to do, not what you want me to do." And I'm like, "All right, okay.
Yeah.
I
Well, there's
surrender."
yeah, there's still a little bit of hope. I was adamant I was not doing this until my second or third year of undergrad, and
Wow.
so I kind of made a U-turn, and I like to tell my dad that he matured and grew up, and I could then work with him because I didn't
Yeah,
change. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
true.
The 20-something knucklehead never changed.
That's got to be a whole other dynamic. I can't
Yeah, it's
imagine my father and I running a business together. God help us.
we made it work. It's I think we both had different senses, and we found our strengths and weaknesses and trust. I don't know how husband and wives do it.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
There's so many husband and wives. Oh, what is the dinner table conversation like there?
no. I love my wife dearly, but she divorced me in about 2 seconds if we
Yeah,
had
I don't
to
want to
work in
be.
business.
Yeah. And so many couples that meet in optometry school, and
Hmm.
then stay together. We have a few of those in the class that I graduated with. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's pretty neat how they do that. But hey, Cheryl, before we jump into everything, for those who don't know the Dr. Cheryl Murphy and haven't read one of your hundreds of articles that you've put out, give us a little background on who you are.
Well, I grew up in upstate New York. I went to SUNY Optometry and graduated in 2004. And long story short, with a summary of my career, is I had triplets about 3 years after that. And that kind of changed the roadmap for where my career, headed. And I went from working full time and overtime to all of a sudden dropping down to part time and being an associate when I think it was always my intention or my dream to have my own practice, but that didn't exactly pan out because of the level of care my kids needed. But being an associate and kind of working at different private practices, optometry, ophthalmology, and for corporate optometry gave me sort of a bird's eye view on the profession, and in different stages and different chapters in my life, different positions that I held really were the best thing for me at that moment in time and allowed me to keep my foot in the door even with newborn triplets, keeping my skills sharp. I never wanted to stop. I was hesitant to just stop and just take time off, which would have been valid, but I said, no, I got to keep my skills sharp. I don't want to forget anything. I want to keep my foot in the door. And so at one moment in time when they were very young, I was doing only 7 hours a week when they were newborns, but I still, was using my skills. So that, along with doing freelance science writing, really, again, gave me such a broad, see the forest from the trees kind of view on our profession, talking to optometrists across the nation about, what they do and their opinions on things. And yeah, for the last 21 years, it's been quite a journey. And I'm 47 years old now, and I think like, well, I own my own private practice, and then I think, no, I'm not going to do it at this point. The kids are off to college this year, but I think to myself, I've had such a fulfilling career. I've I've always surrounded myself with, with good people to work for, and luckily optometry has a lot of those, as does ophthalmology. And I've taken pride in the patients' lives that I've touched through the years, and I think that's going to be it for me. It's not, I won't hang out my own shingle, but in the
Yeah.
other respect, I feel like I hope to have made an impact in my own small way on the profession and on my patients that I've cared for through the years.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think you have done that, and the cool thing about optometry is just how big and broad
Yes.
it is, even still being a very small community. Um, and I had no idea how big it was until I got into the roles I've got with Vision Source and some of the industry stuff. There's so many angles and facets and
Yeah.
different roles to be played.
Yes. And
Beyond the exam room.
subspecialties to learn and
Exactly.
get passionate about or dabble in, and then decide, oh, this isn't my thing, and,
Yep. Yep.
take a U-turn to the next thing.
Yep. I've got a question. We didn't talk about this ahead of time, but I'm curious. And I've talked a little bit about this with my friend Brianna Rue, who does the Book Nerds with me. I think that for the right individual, part-time clinic care and part-time focusing on your passion actually helps me become a better doctor when I'm in the clinic.
Yes.
And just allows me to be a better me than if I were to be in clinic 5, 6 days a week. Have
Yes.
you
I've hit
sensed
that
that?
road bump also, where I was always glad that I kind of had that, different side of things with the science writing, the freelance writing. But I think at this point in my career, once you're in it 20 years plus, it is nice to either focus on a subspecialty or get into some type of non-clinical hours to, kind of keep yourself going and keep your passion ignited. I remember when I started working for my mentor, he was an unbelievable, wonderful man and optometrist, Dr. Frank Verdone. He passed away from ALS now, or else I probably would have worked for him my whole career. But when he first hired me right out of optometry school, he said he wanted us to see patients and have every patient that walk out say that that was the best eye exam they ever had, and that was the nicest doctor that they ever met. And being with him and kind of seeing that quality of patient care early on really like impacted me. And yeah, I've tried to keep that through every position that I've had. But when I remember when he hired me, he was, I think, 44 years old at the time. He owned his own private practice located with inside a lens crafters, two of them actually, very, very highly health oriented exams. And I remember him saying that, I said, oh, I love this. I love going in the exam room. I love seeing patients, because I was like a new graduate and happy to be out and working and using my skills. And he said, boy, if it wasn't for me running the business side of my practice, I don't know if I'd be so impassioned. At this point, I've got a few years on you. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I realized, like, boy, I see what he's saying now. I'm glad I had that writing to keep me passionate and doing other work, non-clinical work, that still is within the profession, is such a blessing and a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a conversation with Dave Kading not too long ago where we talked about finding your emphasis, because optometry, how you were taught in school, can only carry the excitement so far, right?
Yeah.
That young new grad energy, but really finding what your emphasis is, whether it's myopia management or sclerals or dry eye or running a business and diving into
Hmm.
the metrics and the financial side of it, or science writing like you have. I think it's important to find your identity and what that emphasis is, because we all have primary care, but what's that
Yeah.
extra thing that we have? So Cheryl, how did you get into the science writing, as somebody who avoided any type of writing they possibly could have?
I was always a reader, so I always loved English. Actually, um my first grade teacher, my mom, when she used to run into my teachers in the grocery store or whatever, she used to say, "Oh, she's a doctor now," and you expect all these like applause and accolades. But my first grade teacher, when she ran into her, she goes, "Oh, she's a doctor?" And my mom goes, "Yeah, what's wrong with that?" And she said, "Oh, I always thought she'd become a writer." And so it was funny to hear like that disappointment in someone's reaction, for probably the first time that they thought I was going to go into writing. But really, it started off with, after my kids were born, I felt like I was repeating the same thing over and over again to patients. I don't know if we're doing as an efficient job at patient education as we could be doing, at least back in 2008. So I started a blog, and it was actually one of my friends, Justin Bazan, that
Yeah, I know
you know
Justin.
him.
Yep.
I actually went to school with him. We went, I've known him since he was 13 years old. And we were talking one day, and I said, oh, I just feel like I'm repeating stuff. And I feel like people don't ask associates their opinions of things. They only ask, practice owners their opinions of things. And I said, I wish there was like a voice for associates, like, cause he said there should be, and you should do it. You should make it. And I said, no, nobody's going to listen, and they're not going to take, what I'm saying into consideration. I don't own my own practice or anything. And he said, just start doing it. Just start blogging, start writing, see what happens. And so I started my little WordPress blog, and through a couple of other connections that Justin got me in with, they say a good leader is someone who doesn't just climb the ladder, but reaches their hand down to help pull other people back up. And that's what kind of Justin did for me, and a few other people he introduced me to did for me. They said, oh, let me connect you with this editor, of this, Optometry Trade magazine. Let me connect you with this person. And, I just started chugging away at it, writing article after article. And once you get enough of them and you have a little bit of a resume built, it's easier to get bigger pieces and ask for a higher rate of pay. And then you think to yourself, like, boy, this is actually, producing a little paycheck here. This is good.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of first got started, I guess, with Justin will be happy to hear that it was his encouragement that kind of made me say, you know what, maybe he's right. I do have something to say. I've never been shy to say what's on my mind. So I do have something to say, and, maybe someone would listen if I posted it online. And then it took off from there.
That's pretty neat. And I liked how you wrapped it up with why just start doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that concept is a hurdle that for some reason, I don't think it's unique to optometrists, but it's tough for us to just start. Right? We want
Yeah.
it to be perfect, whether it's the first time putting an amniotic membrane on, or I wanted to treat my first myopic patient, or I know you're doing a lot with the light adjustable lenses now, right? The
Yeah.
first time I'm doing, this procedure, we're so scared of, I think, of failure or not being perfect that we don't start.
Yeah.
And,
That
and
fear can
once
be paralyzing.
yeah,
You
right.
got to work through it.
So take us back to the very first blog you posted, and
Oh my gosh.
when you hit
What was it?
submit.
Hmm.
You might not know what it was, but you can probably remember the feeling of when you just clicked the post button the first time, and now
And
it's
then I was clicking the
out for the
refresh
world.
button to see how many people read it. How many people read it? Still nobody. Still nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember that moment where I hit the first one, but I remember coming up with topics in clinic and saying, like, I got to talk about this. People are still getting this wrong, or people still don't understand, what's going on. I remember one of them, I think, that first got shared by other optometrists, which I found interesting, was a one that I wrote, a long time ago about 5 reasons why you need a contact lens reevaluation every year. Like,
Mm-hmm.
kind of trying to explain it to patients, that of
Yep.
why it's so important for us to check on things and make sure things are still, a nice, safe, healthy fit. And that got shared, and I thought, boy, if that got shared, I wish I had a bigger platform and a bit, a way for other optometrists to see this rather than just kind of stumbling across it because they know me and saying, like, yeah, that's what I wanted. That's what I meant to say. I'm going to show that to my patients too.
Yeah.
And then I did some work with Review of Optometric Business, to start off with. And then I wrote my own story in Review of Optometry about how I had a TIA. So when I was 31 years old, I had a mini stroke. And the first, symptom I had, well, one of the first symptoms was I was illiterate. I lost my ability to read.
Hmm.
So I was in the middle of reading my son a book, who was a toddler at the time. a Thomas the Train book, and I was in the middle of a sentence, and all of a sudden I stopped because the words looked like they were in French or something. I couldn't understand what they said. I could see them okay, but I couldn't understand them. And I said, "Oh my God, something's wrong." My mind first went to, I must have like poisoned myself, because it was such a hallucinatory thing that like, something you've learned since you were 5 years old, how to read, and all of a sudden it's like completely stripped from you. And so I go, "Oh my God, I must have like touched a household cleaner into the sink or something and then put it in my mouth, touch my mouth or something. Am I poisoned now?" And, lo and behold, other symptoms came after that, that it was actually the sign of a mini stroke. And after I went through all that and got heart surgery to repair a congenital hole in my heart, Review of Optometry magazine said, "Oh, do you want to write this up? Like, you tell it, we'll call it when the doctor becomes the
Becomes the
patient.
page.
Yeah, and we'll write it up. You can write your own whole story up." And I said, "Yeah, I would love to do that. I want to raise, stroke awareness, that it's not something that just happens to, grandmothers or smokers or people doing high risk activities, but it can happen to young people who, are of healthy weight and, really quite unexpectedly." And then the Cosmopolitan magazine wrote about my story too, after a Review of Optometry magazine did. And yeah, that kind of got me in the door with that magazine. And then I won a writing contest for 2020 magazine, another optometric trade magazine with Jobson. And then I started doing their Sun Vision supplement. So I'd write about UV light a lot. I became kind of like a UV light expert. Then it started to lead me to become like a blue light expert. From when we first started talking about blue
Yeah.
light, I was writing all the articles. I was doing all the white papers, trying to figure out what was even what back then. And then, yeah, just kind of everything snowballed from there. I started writing for Scientific American magazine on their guest blog, more type of pop culture pieces about, like, the eyes and love, and, what happens to your pupils when you're in love, and sort of catchy, pop culture type things about the eyes, how Alfred Hitchcock used to make people more scared, with the visual cues of the eyes, and all sorts of fun articles there. And I was on Huffington Post Science for a while when they allowed bloggers. Yeah, so the writing, it's always been with me. And I guess I guess I threw a snowball and then it just turned into an avalanche. And now things have kind of settled down now. Like I'm not taking as many freelance writing jobs as I used to. I hope it's not because of, Chat GPT or something. I'd like to say
No,
that, we still need personality and opinions of a human, from a human perspective, in our articles. I tried to always kind of give a piece of myself in them, whether it was a Bob Dylan quote or a quote from my dad, or,
of
something else
course.
that would kind of tie it with a personal touch. But yeah, writing is something I'm passionate about, and I feel lucky that I was able to build a little career in that along with optometry.
That's pretty neat. So on the pop culture stuff with Science America, did you come up with the topics? Did they like come up with
Yes.
things? How does that process work?
So they had a very good guest blog policy at the time, and I basically just like cold pitched them without even knowing anybody there. I pitched them for their magazine. I pitched them a piece for the actual magazine to be in print. And they said, they wrote me a letter back and said, while we don't think this would be, a great fit for the magazine, we'd love to have you as a guest blogger on our guest blog network. And I was like, they said, you could write it up for that. And I was like, let's do it. So I wrote it up. And then I think I did over, probably about a dozen pieces for them over time. Um, I've done one on, eyeball tattooing.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, and that was
Yeah,
in recent news. So anything that would kind of catch the public's eye, and pun intended, it was a fun one to write up about for Scientific American.
I'll bet. When I was doing some homework getting ready for this, my 14-year-old came in my office and noticed that one of your articles there was titled "Will carrots help you see better?" But no, but chocolate might. And
Yeah.
so tried to, argue with me about why it's okay that she keeps eating all her candy.
See, I think
And
it might help. I don't know. Yeah, that
uh,
was based on a white paper that came out that was saying that they did a study where they showed college students who took a piece of like dark chocolate, milk chocolate, or white chocolate, and then they had them do like very visually demanding tests, and like kind of like a visually demanding test, and they kind of proved time and time again that those that took dark chocolate performed better, had better visual attention than those who had milk chocolate or white chocolate. So there was something to be said for that. I don't know. Yeah, dispelling the myth about carrots, that's a big one that the public loves,
yeah,
that was started to, hide the invention of radar. They came up with a big fib saying that, the British pilots were saying, the other countries were asking them, why are they able to shoot all the planes out of the sky, so quick and everything. And to hide the fact that they had successfully invented radar before anybody else, they put this big propaganda out that they've been feeding their fighter pilots carrots and it's improved their night vision and daytime vision so much that their skills in shooting down other planes have gotten so great. And they also used it as propaganda during the rolling blackouts that would sometimes happen during the war. They kind of told the public, well, if you can't see at night because your electricity's off, you could eat carrots and that's going to make your night vision better. Our fighter pilots do it to try to kind of, smooth things over there. But that's a myth. Boy, to this day, the public comes in, especially the little kids. They're so cute, talking about carrots. That's one of the things I'm still doing primary care a little bit. And when I see little kids, one of the first things I ask them before I put them behind the slit lamp, no matter what their age is I ask them, what's your favorite fruit? And then they come up with a few, choices, and I start examining their eyes. And I'm like, okay, what's your favorite vegetable? And then they tell me, what their favorite vegetable is while I'm examining their eyes. Gives them something to think about. And whatever they say, I go, oh, that's really good for your eyes. You've got to keep eating that.
ooh, that's a
And
good
the
little
moms,
takeaway.
yeah, and their moms in the chair are like, you was, you know.
Yeah.
But I talk about the ones that are good for the eyes too. The corn and the spinach and the broccoli and the black tea, and the adults and I start talking about that then.
Yeah.
Um, they always say, I thought corn was like a nutritionally deficient like food, like it would give me nothing, and I'm like, it's good for the macula. You should be eating corn. Come on.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's kind of fun how all those stories, not only come about but get propagated. And I imagine researching them is kind of fun too. Mm.
Oh, it's the best. If you have like a passion for lifelong learning, like really to research these articles and be a good journalist, you have to know what questions the audience is going to ask before they even read the article so that you can answer them right as they read. So it really requires like thorough research. I mean, I used to joke around that I'm going to get a bumper sticker for my car that says I break for PubMed because I was on PubMed so much and I was emailing authors so much. If there was a paywall, can you give me a copy of your, article or your study that you wrote? I really want to read it. And boy, you really delve deep into topics. One of which was myopia control, which when I graduated, we didn't talk about it too much. We had Ortho K, back then, but we didn't
Hmm.
really delve into it, I guess, or at least from what I can remember. I'm going to get in trouble now. But a few years ago, Review of Optometry, called me up to ghostwrite an article for a doctor in California who's like a big myopia control guru, and he just didn't have the time to write the article, so they hired me to do it, and then he read it over and edited it and everything. And I just soup to nuts. I learned everything back to the first primary studies, like what's our philosophy? How has it changed? How has prescribing changed? What methods have we used? And how have they changed? What's the best take on things now? And after I gave it to him to give the final okay, he was like, wow, this is really well researched. I was like, well, thank you. Coming from like a guru in the specialty, that made me feel good. Yeah, so it's really great. You get to delve into a lot of different areas and really, get to know everything in order to, like I said, answer any question the audience could come up with before they even, ask it
That's
as
cool.
they're reading it. Yeah.
I never thought of coming at the articles from the angle of answering the questions that
Oh
They're
yeah,
going to be
that's what you
asked.
have to do as a good
That's pretty
writer. You
neat.
think
Yeah.
about your flow,
Mm-hmm.
you think about your transitioning, and you think about that's what journalists do. They try to look at every perspective of things, and they try to argue both sides in their own head so that they can present their case the best. And yeah, and anticipate questions as you're reading it. What are people's thought process going to be as they read it, and how can I answer that, in the next paragraph so that they don't even have to, write that comment or whatever.
Yeah.
It'll already be answered for them.
So that's very cool. What's the average, and I'm sure it varies, but what's the average amount of time that you take researching? So you get an article topic. I want you to write, like on this myopia one,
Hmm.
are you researching it for a week or two? Is it a couple months? What's the typical time
Usually
from
about
like project?
that one I did over the course of probably a little over a month. So it was a couple of weeks of research and, starting to write as you research and
Hmm.
then changing it and adding to it. And it's an evolution. I always say like the first draft is like just the beginning, when you think like, oh, I wrote it. If you didn't write it, you just like started your framework for it. It's going to get ripped apart. And, you're going to kill your darlings, like the writers say, and you're going to, take some unnecessary parts out, even though you think they're cutesy and necessary. They might not be. You have to look at things objectively. And yeah, for a really well researched article like that, I did that. I think it was a couple of summers ago, and I spent, a lot of July doing that. But
Yeah.
with freelance writing, I'm sitting on my brick patio outside, and I'm,
Yeah.
having my laptop, so it's not so bad. You get an iced coffee, and there are
There
worse
you go.
places you can work than your own backyard. So it's nice, and
Absolutely.
like I said, you learn a lot, so that's what makes it fun.
Well, you learn, and it's part of your passion. I remember optometry school feeling very different than undergrad because, quite frankly, I didn't care about learning about Shakespeare, but I did care about learning, eyeball stuff and
Oh
visual
yeah,
science stuff. And so when it's something you're interested in, it becomes less work and more interesting and more exciting.
yeah, absolutely.
So that's pretty cool. How I've always wanted to ask this too, to a ghostwriter. How does it feel to have your work out, but somebody else's name on
Oh,
it?
it's the worst. It's the worst. It's the absolute worst, Aaron. I tell him, Dr. Warner, let me tell, it's the worst. It does feel like, yeah, but it does help when they say you did such a great job on it. They wouldn't have been able to do that the way I did it. So it is a nice compliment that they think I wrote it better than even they could have written it. That was nice to say. But yeah, usually as part of the negotiation as a freelance writer, you talk about your word count or estimated word count that they want, what rate you're going to get paid at, which for me, I've always kind of done it per word. And then you talk about the byline. Does it include a byline or not? So
Hmm.
that's real. That might be the only. Well, no, it's not the only one because sometimes when I've written for Vision Monday, it'll say like it's written by staff or written by associate editors or written by contributing editors instead of the actual name. So with them, I lost some bylines. But that was more objective reporting usually anyway with Vision Monday and less opinionated pieces of work. But yeah, it kills me. Oh, it's like a dagger in my heart. No byline. Can't put that
Uh,
on my resume. Oh, it came out so good.
oh, that's good to know because I still don't write. And
Oh, you
any
did
article
good.
I've got lots of ideas, but organizing it is tough. And so
Yeah.
the articles that I have, you know, written have all been ghost written. Um, but I've looked at them all as which is why I asked, as a partnership between me and the writer because they've got an idea, I've got a bunch of stuff,
And
and so
experience and
and
expertise. Yeah.
right, but working together to put it in a logical format
Yeah.
is kind of cool.
Order.
So it's neat for me to see how it comes out, almost like my contractor at my house when we remodeled. I didn't know exactly what I wanted, but I knew what I wanted, but not how to get there. And so working
Yeah.
through them, it became more of a partnership. So, but I've never asked
But now you know
how they
the
felt.
line to use at the end. Say, oh, this
Yeah,
is so well researched. You wrote it better than even I could have written it.
yeah.
And then
Well,
they'll
they've
just walk
definitely
away
come up better.
smiling from that.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
but it's
It's
it's an
all
art.
Yeah, and it's all about getting the information out there and making ourselves better and our profession better as a whole. So it doesn't matter who gets the glory in the long run, as long as we're, advancing our profession and ourselves and our own, personal growth and professional growth, together and individually. That's what it's really all about.
Yeah. Well, that's why I do the podcast. I think it's fun
Yeah,
to
this
talk
is
to
neat.
everybody,
Yeah.
and I love the different stories. And my goal don't know if I've ever said this out loud, but my goal when anybody listens is really just to start thinking. Right there, I don't want to convey necessarily my opinion. I mostly want to just challenge folks to challenge themselves, right?
Yeah.
And one aspect of something they do to try to make it better or different or unique or open up a different perspective.
Yeah, it's
Um,
nice. It's good to hear everybody's, experiences. There's in different parts of the country, optometry is very different. I was talking to someone in rural Oklahoma the other day, and they were saying, "Yeah, I do SLT, I do this, I do that." I'm like, "Boy, oh my God, that's amazing."
yeah,
New York, we're a long way off from that. New York, we'll be the last to get any of that. But yeah, it's interesting to talk to the optometrists from all over. Really cool.
oh,
There's so
big
much
time.
great technology out there. With there's so many new treatments, and things have just evolved in such a way over the last 20 years that, even with dry eye, I worked as a dry eye specialist for an oculoplastic surgeon for a while. And to do that instead of primary care, it was just so rewarding. And that's before a lot of the newer pharmaceuticals came out, like for Demodex treatment and Mibo and all that sort of
Yep,
thing. I was doing more like functional dry eye treatment with meibomian gland dysfunction and Ilux and Blefex and in-office procedures to help improve the function of the glands and then make an immediate change
yep,
to the health of the glands. And I feel like you get into a specialty like that, especially being like a couple of decades into the career, you think to yourself like, wow, there's that fire again inside me.
yep.
This is like, I'm learning, I'm lit up, I really am enjoying it. Yeah, so there's so many subspecialties in optometry, and I think the optometry schools are kind of gearing themselves up to, in the near future, begin sort of having people graduate with a subspecialty
Hmm.
certification. At least one of the past presidents of an optometry school I talked to said that's the direction they were heading in. And I said, well, what about us veterans that have been doing this a while, and now we have a newfound passion for dry eye, and we want to be, so he said, oh yeah, we'll have you take, they'll have you take a test, I'm sure, and you can demonstrate your extended knowledge in it, and
Yep,
you'll be able to get certified as well. But I think, subspecialties like this are one of the ways that private practice optometry is going to be able to, really survive and thrive, and instead of kind of folding in the long run. So I think it's so important to be medically driven and find one of those subspecialties or a couple of them
yep,
that you're really passionate about, and whether it's you that have them and practice them in your office, or if you hire associates, that have a broader knowledge base than you do to begin with, and have them kind of be that guru in your practice. I think that's really going to be super beneficial to help private practice stay
yep.
afloat and thrive for years to
I
come.
could not agree more. I remember one of my professors um, drilling into our heads in school that we needed to be everything to everyone. Right. Low vision comes in, take care
Yeah,
of it. VT comes in, take care of it.
it's
Dry eye comes in,
hard.
take care of it.
It's
And
hard. You
I
can't.
no, and I think it's a disservice to do that.
Yeah, you
Right.
can't.
I think as a clinic, depending on how you've set up or how you relationships, which is kind of neat with no matter what mode you're practicing in, whether it's an ODMD or commercial or private, having that network who I send people to, because low vision, I ain't your guy, right?
Yeah.
But I know who I'm going to send you to,
Yes,
and
exactly. And been sending to
um,
them for years. Yeah.
yeah,
And they know their
um,
work. They do,
yep, they do
that's
good,
their
but
passion.
exactly. But I know what I do well, and so
Yeah.
and I know what I do pretty good up to a point, and so I'll manage that up to a point, and then send out if I need
Yeah.
more care, and I'll hang on to the things that I like to do, longer because that's what I'm good at. And thankfully,
Yeah.
with 4 docs in the practice, we've got some inter office referrals, but they're definitely referrals, away from me and over to somebody who's a little bit more excited about that
Taking
disease
that
state or
on.
that condition.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat. So I'm curious, Cheryl, in all the people you've interviewed, all the articles you've written, what are and I love the bookends when I talk to people. So what are like what stands out in your mind as like one of the best, and what stands out in your mind as one of like the
The best people I've
craziest,
interviewed.
right,
Oh,
best experience? Yeah,
I
just
have a
any
good
ones.
crazy interview story for you. So
Love it.
I was with I kind of won a contest, and I was a guest editor in chief for 2020 magazine, and I got to go to Vision Expo with them too and do some live reporting at Vision Expo East in New York City. This was years ago. It was really cool. And they said, we're going to have you write an article about Lisa Loeb, and you're going to interview her. So
Hmm.
being like, growing up when I did, Lisa, oh my God, this is
Yeah.
so I go, oh my God, this is before really iPhones existed. So I'm taking us back here to my early freelancing days. I actually got a mini tape recorder, like the reporters use with the little tiny, tapes. And I go, oh, I'm
Yep.
going to tape record it. Then I'll go home. I'll like type it up on my laptop. I'll remember all the direct quotes she said instead of me trying to scribble it down and everything. This will be perfect. So I see her at her booth because she has her own eyewear line for years now. It's really beautiful. And we sit down and we're doing a one-on-one interview, and my thing's jammed. The button's not going down. It's not working. And she's, a little older than me. And she's like, oh, I'm familiar with these things. Let me take a look at it. So she takes my mini cassette recorder, and the battery part of it had gotten like overheated, and it literally started like melting in her hand, and she like dropped it, and she's like, oh my God, that's really hot. And I'm like, oh my God, I've just burnt Lisa Loeb. Like, what am I doing? I'm like, good thing they didn't give me Justin Timberlake after this. Like, I'm like, boy, because that's when he had his Phoropter cover. That was one of the people they were interviewing that year too. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe. So that was like a crazy. So then I went back to the pen and paper. I was writing down what she said and everything. I told her, I'm going to email your person, your agent later to, just to make sure you're comfortable with the quotes that I, write down for you and everything. And she's like, oh, sure. So that was probably one of the craziest interview processes I've ever had. And my friend is a professional photographer, and I actually had him meet me in the city that day and take pictures and everything. So he has all these pictures of me holding up the crazy tape recorder at the
That's
burnt,
funny.
at the end and everything before I threw it out. And hopefully I didn't cause a fire at the Javits Center. We would have heard about it.
Yeah. I burnt Lisa Loeb. That's a
Yeah. Yeah, but
that's
I
funny.
think one of the most memorable was like that like president of an optometry school I interviewed, and when we kind of concluded the interview and we went off the record on a few things, and I got to ask him his opinion of like the future of the profession and where we're headed and things like that. And I think we're at a time where all of medicine is kind of evolving and changing for better or for worse with all this private equity stuff and billing changes and insurance changes. It's not the optometry we practiced 20 years ago. It's gotten much more complex than that, and it's hard to have a practice that doesn't have a dedicated biller coder or something, even be able to keep up with all of these regulations and rules and everything like that. So it was interesting to kind of speak with them off the record and hear their take on private equity and medicine. And I just think that a lot of medicine, it's not just our specialty. I think in some ways we're headed in the wrong direction, but how can we turn this ship around? It's so tough. It's a question I don't have the answer to, but I think that um, with patient care, it's hard for me not to do my absolute best quality care and take the time needed. I think there's a delicate balance that especially associates have to try to navigate, because you don't want the owning doctor to come in and say, oh, you spent a half an hour with that dry eye check. What are you doing? This is chair time. It's like I feel like associates sometimes get, the they don't, I don't know. It's hard to be an associate. I guess it's what I'm trying to say. I think a lot of people talk about how hard it is to be an owner nowadays, but when you're an associate and you work for a practice and you see things changing in a way that you don't think is with, go aligning with your values and your heart anymore, how do you know when to walk away and walk away from the patient base that you built at a particular practice? It's like a very sad thing that happens sometimes, but I think that you can't lie to yourself, right? We all have it in our heart and in our soul, the type of doctor that we need to be so that we can sleep easy at night. And I think that sometimes, unfortunately, as people's goals change, whether they're looking to try to, elevate profits to sell off at a higher price in a few years or something like that, if the owners of the practice are changing their values and they're trying to change yours in a way you don't feel comfortable with, it's best to part ways instead of kind of riding things out through whatever transition is going to happen. Um, yeah, it's very tough. It's happening in ophthalmology. It's every specialty, not just eyes. But I went to my 20-year reunion for optometry school, and they were giving a Q&A at the end of it, and they were talking about like the current state of things. A lot of the owners were, and they were saying like, I can't find anybody who wants to really work for us anymore. They with these people offering a $30,000 sign-in bonus, and this one saying that they'll give them this, that, and this. I can't find an associate that'll stay with us for more than 2 to 3 years, and they were kind of talking to the optometry school, almost like saying they're part of the problem because now they're kind of partnering with a lot of these
Yep.
corporate retail, structures in our field, and because it's sort of the way it is now. And but the owners were really kind of beaten up, saying they can't find. And I kind of, my heart was beating, and I kind of raised my hand and I said, listen, I'm looking for a job right now. I'm like, it's hard to stay at a practice when that their goal is to, sell for within 1 or 2 or 3 years, and
Yep.
you see repairs to the structure not being done. You're being told to go faster, see more per hour, less medical optometry care. That's what like drew the line for me at one place. I didn't want to do the optometry of the 70s and 80s, that where we're just pushing the glasses and
Yep.
contacts and just referring out for everything else. It was, so when changes like that start to happen, especially after you were already hired and established at a place, I think you have to follow your heart and go to a place that aligns better with your values. Sometimes, you find out after being hired by a practice that it's not a good professional match. Usually I tell people, if it's not a good professional match within 6 months, because,
Hmm.
the honeymoon period's kind of over.
Yep.
The over friendliness is kind of over. And the real dirt starts to come out or whatever, or the real how things work, it starts to, on both ends, starts to come out. But sometimes I guess if values change, yeah, that it can happen at any time where you realize like, boy, this was a good professional match for me at one point in time. Unfortunately, it's not anymore, and then you have to kind of develop an exit strategy. Yeah, so I think, associates, I think I commented on one of your podcasts one time because you had a few owning doctors on and they were talking about their things. And I go, what about where's the associate perspective on this? Because I guess I'm still always kind of fighting for that voice to be heard among the crowd.
But I think it's an incredibly powerful voice, and I don't believe everyone should be an owner. I don't believe everyone should be in private practice. I think there's lots
Mm-hmm.
of different roles to be played. Um, just like on a football team, right? Not everybody can be the
Yeah.
quarterback or the running back, and you've got to have a third and fourth string. Not pointing to anybody saying you're there, but the ball boy is just as important as anybody else because they've got to manage the equipment. Um, but I think what sometimes I've seen get lost is communication
Mm-hmm.
and the assumptions and revisiting the values, revisiting what we're doing, what our goals are, and making sure that everybody at least knows what they are. Hopefully they're
Yeah.
aligned, but have a chance to build it and whatnot. No, I would love to revisit the associate voice. So I think that's where
Yeah.
you just volunteered yourself for another
Oh, I'm going to be on
podcast,
again. Yay. I'm
and
excited.
yeah, let's talk about it and hammer things. I remember one situation I was involved in where the associate wanted to buy the practice. The owner was hoping that the associate would buy the practice, and they both called me within a day, really frustrated at the other. And the associate called me and said, I've been working really hard and showing him everything that I can do, and like, what else can I do? He's not, giving me the opportunity. And the owner's like, I'm waiting for him just to tell me he wants to. And I laughed and said, all you guys have to do is have a coffee, and it will solve both your problems, right? And not that everyone's in that associate wanting to be an owner, but just talk. And and I agree that sometimes values change and people grow up. I'm not that skinny kid from the picture that you wrote. I'm no longer running Ironmans.
You still are. You still are.
Well, not my Ironman days anymore, but but now I do different things, and passions change, and we communicate those. But no, I think everybody is critically involved in patient care, from staff to our virtual assistants now that are halfway across the world that are engaged, and associates. And I wish I could say that I'm in this for the money, but that would have gone a different career path and been a hedge fund manager or something, right? Worn a finance bro vest instead.
You got to get one of those.
Polos. Yeah.
It's true.
That would be a fun conversation to really dive into, and I think that there's frustrations on both ends, and a lot of it is just we're all trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, especially in this time of change, with everything. It's such a struggle. Yeah.
A lot of struggle and understanding. Without minimizing it, I like to refer to it just as, the rules of the game are changing, and we got to stay on top of the rules changes so we can keep playing the game to win. Because at the end of the day, patients are the ones that suffer if we don't, and that's the sad part.
Yeah.
So,
Truly.
Well, this has been a fun conversation, and I was going to say, let's not make it 13 years till we chat live again, but
boy.
We just volunteered you to come back for a deep dive into associate perspectives. I think that'll be fun.
That sounds good. Don't get me in trouble.
Oh.
I'm still an associate.
No, you know what? It's important that we all hear what the concerns are. It's in part of my role at Vision Source, I became the IMED liaison, and which I jokingly said that's the least favorite position anybody has, because when it comes to managed vision care, it's really easy for you to be the most hated man in that organization. But understanding their perspective, understanding different perspectives, really is enlightening. And not to defend anybody, but it's just there's a lot more below the surface that I think that we all appreciate, and you don't know what you don't know. So understanding things from any team member's perspective, especially the associate docs, I think is important. And I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Like you said, it's all about having that conversation and open communication, and that helps.
Absolutely. So we'll get that scheduled, but in the meantime, if you want to follow Cheryl, I'll put her Instagram handle in the show notes, and definitely check out her articles. The Scientific America has some fun ones.
Yeah, Google that.
I'll link that in there in the show notes as well.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Of course. Thanks, Cheryl.
Look forward to it next time.